How's it going, everybody? It's Young here with a Last of Us Part 2 trailer analysis. The first Last of Us was undoubtedly one of my most beloved games of that console generation, so I couldn't be more ecstatic about analyzing Part 2 of the critically acclaimed game. Let's not waste any time and just dive right into it. The trailer opens with this wide shot of a beautiful, overgrown forest landscape that is very reminiscent of some of the scenery we saw in the first game, except it's now rendered in a gorgeous next-generation game engine. I really can't wait to see how this game looks like in action, especially on the PlayStation 4 Pro. The next shot pans the camera further back, and this time the focus is on this tree here, where we see claw marks engraved on it. Now, my first assumption was that this could be the work of one of the infected from the first game, but after doing some research, I realized that none of the infected from Last of Us 1 had any sort of claws that could cause this kind of damage. This tells me one of two things. Either this claw mark was caused by a new type of weapon, maybe some kind of claw-like contraption you can construct as part of an expanded crafting system, or this is hinting at an evolved infected enemy that has sharp, deadly claws. Keep in mind that considering Ellie has been confirmed to be 19 years old in this game, and based on the fact that she was 14 at the start of Last of Us 1, which takes place throughout the course of a year, so perhaps she was 15 by the end of the game, that places Last of Us Part 2 somewhere around 4 years after the events of the first game. I'd say that's plenty of time for new types of infected enemies to arise. The next shot pulls back even further, where the ravaged human civilization starts to seep into the natural forest. Then, as the camera pulls back even further, I'd like to very quickly zoom into this license plate on the back of the car here. I'm wondering if this could be used to narrow down the game's setting, since every state in America has a different design for a license plate. Unfortunately, all the dirt and rust smeared across the license plate makes it hard to pinpoint its exact features. But if any of you can recognize where this license plate might be from, let us know in the comments below. On the other hand, this license plate might have been custom designed for Last of Us, so it may not end up having any significance. Zooming back out, we can see that this once used to be a neighborhood before the cordyceps brain infection spread around 25 years ago. As we zoom even further back, we are shown what is clearly the symbol of the fireflies spray painted onto this stop sign. This indicates one of two things. Either this was once a firefly base of operations, or the fireflies were here at one point and left behind this calling card on purpose. I'll elaborate further in later parts of the analysis. Then, after the trailer shows us the Naughty Dog logo, this is then followed by a shot showing us Ellie shaking hands, which is very interesting. There are two possible explanations that I can think of for this. One, she just finished engaging in some kind of struggle and might be shaking from the adrenaline. After all, we do see a bunch of corpses later in the trailer lying on puddles of fresh blood. Two, maybe there's something wrong with her body. Keep in mind that during the events of Last of Us Left Behind, Ellie was bitten by an infected, but lived because she was immune to the infection. However, that doesn't mean that the infection is completely gone from her system. There is still a mutated version of the infection living inside her, and who knows how that could have evolved over the last 4 years or so. So another possibility is that her infection has evolved enough to the point where it's starting to affect some of her physical and mental capabilities. Let's now move on to this next shot where we get a much clearer view of Ellie's tattoo. A fun fact about this tattoo is that it was actually teased a little over 2 months ago through a limited edition poster that Naughty Dogs created as part of their celebration of Outbreak Day 2016, which took place on September 26th, the day that the cordyceps virus reached critical mass in the lore of Last of Us. As you can see here, the poster shows the very same tattoo that envelops Ellie's arm in the new trailer. Those sneaky bastards. Following the release of the reveal trailer, Naughty Dogs also released on social media a high-resolution image of the tattoo's official design, which looks something like this. The tattoo seems to show a moth on top of 2 pieces of plant, one dark with an abundance of smaller leaves and the other one light with a smaller quantity of bigger leaves. Now, with so little context as to what Last of Us Part 2 will be about, it's hard to say for sure what this tattoo symbolizes, but something that came to mind was the idea that moths are naturally attracted to light. It just so happens that fireflies are able to emanate light at night, so perhaps part of the symbolism here is that Ellie, the moth, will be hunting down and chasing after the light, the fireflies. Also, you may recall that a tagline of the fireflies from Last of Us 1 was "Look for the light." And what better animal to hunt and chase after it than Ellie the moth? Moths are also often associated with personal struggle, growth, and transformation. These insects start out as larvae and eventually wrap themselves into a cocoon from which they alone must struggle through to flourish into a moth. If the moth were to receive any outside help in opening the cocoon, it would actually emerge too weak to thrive. So Ellie's tattoo might also be symbolic of a personal struggle and the ensuing growth and transformation that she will undergo throughout The Last of Us Part 2. Other common associations with moths include things like vulnerability, determination, attraction, and faith. But with so little context, the moth symbolism could be interpreted any number of ways, so maybe it's better to wait until more information is revealed about the game before formulating any more theories. Moving on, after Ellie tunes the guitar, she starts playing and singing Through the Valley by Sean James, the lyrics of which are fairly straightforward. It's about an individual who is fueled by hate and vengeance, to the point that they lose sight of everything, including the line between good and evil. The song also expresses the notion that the individual is fully aware of their actions and accepts that once they embark on this path, they cannot be redeemed. Perhaps a part of them attempts to justify that maybe their actions are just and righteous, but towards the end of the song, the individual acknowledges that they know deep down inside that they can't walk on the path of the right because they're wrong. In the case of this trailer, the subject of the lyrics most likely represents the vengeful Ellie herself. Now, what's interesting is that there are a couple of lines from the song that Ellie doesn't sing in the trailer. The unsung lines read as follows: "While I came upon a man at the top of a hill, call himself the savior of the human race, said he come to save the world from destruction and pain. But I said, how can you save the world from itself?" If you've played Last of Us 1, I think you'll agree that in the context of Ellie being the subject of the song, this man at the top of the hill likely refers to Joel. In the first game, part of his quest was to escort Ellie to a Firefly's laboratory in hopes that her immunity to the infection can be used to extract a vaccine that could potentially save the human race from the infection. But when Joel found out that the procedure would come at the sacrifice of Ellie's life and that the Fireflies were willing to make that sacrifice, Joel chose to save Ellie, dooming mankind as a whole to save this person that he loved. This is where the line, "But I said, how can you save the world from itself?" comes in. In the context of The Last of Us, it's almost as if the narrator of the song is asking, how can you save mankind when it's willing to do horrible things to get what it wants? Is mankind really worth saving if they're willing to go so far to save themselves? Now let me ask you something. When I said the words "willing to do horrible things," who immediately popped in your head? Did you see Marlene and the Fireflies or Joel? That's really the conundrum of the first game, isn't it? Were Joel's actions justified in saving this little girl, even if it meant dooming mankind? Did he retain whatever last bit of humanity he had left, or was he being selfish by choosing to sacrifice the many in his unwillingness to lose another daughter, if you will? On the other end of the spectrum, were the Fireflies' actions justified? Were they being selfish by choosing to sacrifice a little innocent girl to save the many? Or were they doing what was necessary for the long-term betterment of their species? What's more selfish, Joel's parental instinct to sacrifice the future of mankind to save his daughter, or the Firefly's willingness to sacrifice an innocent child to potentially save the future of mankind? The brilliance of Last of Us is that there is really no clear-cut answer to any of these questions. This conundrum of what's justified and what isn't, what's selfish and what isn't, what's good and what's evil, this gray area represents humanity at its core. Who in The Last of Us you think represents the best and the worst in humanity will really depend on your own life experiences and worldviews. I know a lot of parents might think that Joel was justified in his actions, or at least can relate to why he did what he did, while those who haven't had children may find Joel's actions repulsive and selfish. It's this unsolvable conundrum that Through the Valley summarizes through this line in a handful of words. Now, what's really interesting is that Ellie forgoes singing those words. Instead, she stops short and concludes with, "No, I can't walk on the path of the right because I'm wrong." Does this signify that Ellie has set morality aside to achieve her vengeance no matter the cost? I get the sense that she's very much aware of the fact that she's walking on this very dark path and that there will be no redeeming her in the end. But she also doesn't seem to care. Something's got her really pissed off, and the question is what? I'll talk about that later in the analysis. Moving on, let's discuss this shot right here where we can see that Ellie is sitting on a bed inside a room with music posters plastered all over the walls. Something that Last of Us 1 established is that Ellie is an avid lover of pop culture, remnants of a world that no longer exists. So with all these posters hanging on the walls, I almost get the sense that this could be Ellie's own room, which makes me wonder if we are perhaps looking at a compound where Ellie and Joel decided to settle into sometime between the first and second games, and if the dead people strewn about are actually allies who were slain by outside forces and who Ellie is grieving. Another possibility is that Ellie and Joel settled down in this little compound and then these guys came in and attacked, and maybe Ellie defended herself. There's a number of angles to this trailer. Next up, here's a shot that shows us a close-up of Ellie's neck, which is currently marked with blood. Now, at first sight, I thought this could be a bite mark, but after a closer inspection, I get the impression that this is just a streak of blood, maybe a small cut or a bruise. We also see fresh blood dripping down the side of her face, which comes from one of her scars, and this further indicates that whatever scuffle she was a part of happened quite recently. Okay, here's where things get a little weird. A very popular theory out there right now is that Joel is actually dead in this trailer, walking about as a figment of Ellie's imagination, and one of the things that people point to for this is the way Joel's silhouette seeps through the blinding light in an almost angelic and ghostly fashion. I kind of get what they mean. Now, I'm personally divided on whether I believe this theory or not, as I found that a strong case could be made for either side. I will, however, do my best to present arguments from both sides and let you decide what you believe in. To counter-argue Joel's angelic entrance, I would like to zoom into this puddle of blood and point out that you can actually see Joel's reflection here, which might be indicative of him being physically present. Now, I'm fully aware that this isn't hard evidence, because there are many dead all along characters in pop culture whose reflections do show up, and one could argue that Naughty Dog left Joel's reflection there on purpose to fool the audience. But I would counter-argue by saying that there is a general sense that he's there in physical form. In the foreground, we also see what is clearly a corpse lying on freshly spilled blood, once again further hinting at a very recent struggle. In the next shot, we see the camera pan as Joel makes his way towards Ellie, and here you can see Joel physically interacting with the environment in subtle ways, from the leaves that scatter about with his steps to the reflections that emanate from the wet floor, once again giving off the sense that he's physically there. Then, if we freeze the trailer at the right time, we can see this streak of blood on the wall in front of this corpse that seems to be indicative of a slash attack, possibly to the jugular, judging by the pool of blood that can be found below this dead man's neck region. I'm having a hard time determining whether this was the work of Ellie, who maybe infiltrated what could be an enemy compound of sorts, or perhaps it was the enemies who infiltrated Ellie's compound and she took care of them in self-defense, or if this was the work of an outside force who invaded what could be a friendly little community that Ellie and Joel became a part of after the events of the first game, which might explain the existence of a room that looks like it could be Ellie's very own. I feel like this house could possibly be somewhere that Ellie settled down. The invader might also be the same entity who left these claw marks seen on the tree at the beginning of the trailer, with these claws possibly being responsible for slash attacks of this nature. As the camera pans further, here's a very good case one can make for Joel being dead. Look how clean this guy is as he walks about. His pants look like they've been freshly washed, and there's not a single trace of stain or blood to be found anywhere on his attire or on his skin, a stark contrast to Ellie's condition. Furthermore, Joel's hands look unnaturally pristine considering his current predicament. This is especially apparent when you compare his hands to Ellie's. Ellie's hands clearly show signs of bruising, little bits of blood spatter, and a general lack of hygiene. But when it comes to Joel, there is nary a scratch or smudge to be found. Even the trademark revolver that Joel is holding is squeaky clean. And as the camera pans up, you can see that Joel's jacket is also very well kept. Overall, this is a very bizarre display of Joel that does make him stick out like a sore thumb, which definitely adds to the argument that something here might be amiss. As Joel continues to walk down this dreary hallway, the camera eventually focuses on a woman who has been slain in the bathroom of this house. Once again, there's the question of, is she an ally or an enemy? I'd like to say that she's Firefly, but don't fireflies normally wear yellowish greenish attire and are usually fairly well equipped with weapons and armor? Or at the very least, don't they normally wear the Firefly insignia around their arm or somewhere around their body? From what I can see, these dead bodies just don't evoke any semblance of being Firefly. So this begs the question, what does the logo at the beginning of the trailer mean? As I stated before, my train of thought is that either this compound once used to be a Firefly base of operations before they were driven out, or the Fireflies came, killed the people in this house, perhaps as a way to send Ellie a message or in their attempt to hunt her down, and before they left, they spray painted this symbol as a way of saying that we were here. That may seem pretty aggressive and savage, but after the way Joel and Ellie left things with the Fireflies at the end of Last of Us 1, I don't think it's far-fetched to expect that Fireflies are now willing to take drastic measures to acquire Ellie, the key ingredient to creating a vaccine for the cordyceps infection. Like Ellie, perhaps the Fireflies intend to walk their own version of the Valley of the Shadow of Death for what they believe to be the greater good. The camera then continues panning, and we're eventually shown our best look of Joel. Strangely enough, the trailer never shows his face, which is another red flag for people theorizing that Joel is dead. Although, you could counter-argue that maybe this is just a way of Naughty Dog saying that Ellie is the focus of the new game. Maybe there isn't some kind of deep meaning to it. Again, you could argue either or. And once again, you can see that every facet of this character is strangely well kept, which adds to the theory that Joel maybe really is dead. The camera finally pans all the way into the room Ellie resides in, where we can see that there is a man lying at her feet, also very dead. Towards the bottom here is what looks to be a machete, which makes a return from Last of Us 1. One possibility is that if Ellie is the one who killed all these people, then maybe this is the weapon that she used to do the deed, which might indicate that Ellie might be using more weapons beyond the pocket knife, especially considering she's the main character of Last of Us Part 2. Otherwise, it might have belonged to this man who was maybe defending himself. Once again, he just doesn't evoke the sense that he's Firefly from where I'm sitting, so he's either an enemy from another faction or a fallen ally that she's mourning over. From here, we can also get a really good look at Ellie herself. What immediately stood out to me is that there's actually very little blood spatter on her when compared to the carnage that's laid out before her and in the hallway. I feel like if Ellie really were the one to have killed all those people, she'd be a little more drenched in blood. We do see that she has splotches of blood on her skin here and there, but for the most part, it seems like they're injuries rather than blood from her victims. This is why I raised the possibility that Ellie came and found these bodies like this rather than having killed these people herself. Maybe she's mourning over them, and maybe this has something to do with her motivation to find and kill every last one of them, whoever them might be. Moving on, here are two very subtle details about Ellie's appearance. I'd like to draw your attention to her overall attire and the guitar she's playing. Let's start with the attire. If it looks in any way familiar, that's because it bears a striking resemblance to the attire that Ellie's friend Riley wore during the events of Left Behind. So one interesting theory is that the attire Ellie's wearing is meant to be a remembrance of Riley. Then there's the guitar, which most likely represents Joel. If you recall, there's a point in the first game where Joel tells Ellie that he'll teach her how to play guitar once things settle down.
Yeah, once we're done with this whole thing, I'm gonna teach you how to play guitar. I reckon you'd really like that.
Which he seemingly did, judging by the trailer. So one way to look at this could be that in the same manner that Ellie's attire may be a remembrance of Riley, the guitar might be a remembrance of Joel, perhaps further suggesting that Joel really is dead. And on the other end of the spectrum, maybe she's just playing the guitar, but the Riley costume definitely raises an eyebrow or two. This might then tie into another common symbol of moths. In some cultures, moths are seen as the harbingers of death. Some believe that when a moth lands on someone, it signifies that their imminent death approaches, while others believe that moths are actually lost souls of the dead fluttering about who are trying to send a warning or an omen of some kind. So one interesting thought is that maybe the moth on Ellie's tattoo represents Joel, a lost dead soul who has taken form through Ellie's deteriorating hallucinatory mind to relay a warning or an omen. Perhaps that's why he asks her these strange questions at the end of the trailer.
What are you doing, kiddo? You really gonna go through with this?
Some people may interpret this as Joel asking, "Are you really going to hell and back to avenge me? Are you sure about this? Are you sure this is what you want?" It's almost like he's giving her one last chance to get out of this mindset. Are you really sure you want to do this? On the topic of Riley and Joel, something else I noticed is that the moth on Ellie's tattoo resides on two pieces of plants. One possibility is that each plant represents the people most dear to her. So maybe one for Riley and one for Joel, with the moth on top symbolizing their deaths? I might be reaching here, but all I'm trying to say is that I can see how some people might come to the conclusion that Joel is dead in this trailer based on his angelic entrance, his clean appearance, and the various interesting symbolic implications. The trailer finally concludes with Ellie putting the guitar away and uttering the words,
"I'm gonna find, and I'm gonna kill every last one of them."
So yeah, one thing that's very clear about this trailer is that Ellie is pissed about something, and she's out for blood. I think it's fairly safe to assume that she's probably going after the Fireflies for whatever reason. The key to solving this trailer, I believe, lies in the question of why she's going after them. Maybe it's as simple as Joel finally having told Ellie that the Fireflies were willing to sacrifice her life to create a vaccine, at which point Ellie felt betrayed by the Fireflies, and by Marlene in particular. Perhaps that's enough of a driving factor for Ellie to embark on her path of vengeance against the ruthless militia. A second possibility is that Ellie had moved on from everything that happened with the Fireflies and decided to pursue a peaceful life with Joel, finding a friendly community along the way. Perhaps the very same one we see in this trailer, but one day maybe the Fireflies, who are still hell-bent on using Ellie to create a vaccine, found her whereabouts and attacked this compound and killed many of Ellie's newfound allies along the way. And perhaps the dead bodies strewn about in this trailer are those very same allies who Ellie may be mourning and vowing vengeance for. The last possibility I can think of, and this is the crazy one, is that at some point between Last of Us 1 and 2, the Fireflies were somehow responsible for Joel's death. So maybe the Joel we see in this trailer is a figment of Ellie's imagination and a result of Ellie's deteriorating mind as a result of the evolving cordyceps infection in her system, and Ellie vows to avenge Joel, with Conscience Joel asking Ellie, "Is this really something you want to do?" Assuming that Ellie is referring to finding and killing the Fireflies at the end of the trailer, these are the three possibilities that I can think of. Keep in mind that I could be wrong here and there may be other possibilities. Maybe there is not enough context in this trailer to get a full picture of what Naughty Dog has in store for us as far as Last of Us Part 2's story goes. To finish off this analysis video, I would like to go back to the Joel is dead theory, but this time talk about some important reasons for why there's a good chance that Joel isn't really dead in Last of Us Part 2. Again, I'm divided on this, but what's keeping me from leaning to the other side outright is the simple fact that it just doesn't sound like the kind of plot device that Naughty Dog would use. This may be an opinion, but from my own experience with their games, they've always specialized in telling very simple stories that have a lot of depth to them without any gimmicks. This whole Joel being dead the whole time plot device sounds like a gimmick to me. If Hideo Kojima or someone like that was involved in this project, I'd believe anything, but we're talking about Naughty Dog. Something that Last of Us Part 2 director Neil Druckmann emphasized during a panel he did at PSX 2016 is that they wouldn't be doing this sequel if they weren't sure that they would do right by fans with this story. They don't have room for gimmicks. As a matter of fact, the sequel almost didn't happen because they tried out so many different ideas that just didn't pan out. So my question to you is, after all this time, effort, consideration that went into Part 2, do you really think that the idea they would go for is the one where Joel is dead the whole time? Am I the only one who thinks there's something about that notion that sounds off? It just doesn't feel like it's something Neil or Naughty Dog would do. I see very few ways such a plot device could actually work effectively in a tale like Last of Us, which at its core is about the relationship between Joel and Ellie. Neil Druckmann himself said that Last of Us wouldn't feel right without these two characters. With that in mind, I just don't think Neil would actually have Joel be dead the whole game. Joel dying halfway through the game is one thing, but having Ghost Joel or subconscious Joel guiding Ellie through this story and game feels like a cliched idea and something that goes against the tenets of Naughty Dog's storytelling. In fact, I would argue it's so cliched that everyone already figured it out. And I don't know, just that simple fact that this is the obvious conclusion tells me that it's the most wrong conclusion. I mean, who knows? Maybe they can somehow manage to make it work if they do plan to kill Joel right off the bat and have him be a part of Ellie's subconscious. Maybe Naughty Dog has a very good idea that could make what could otherwise be cliched be something amazing. But knowing Naughty Dogs, despite all the evidence you can find in the new trailer suggesting Joel might be dead, a part of me just can't make any sense of the notion that this is the route that Naughty Dog would take the story. It's just a little too bizarre. But those are just my thoughts and opinions. All we can really do now is wait until Naughty Dog reveals more footage of the game that could shed more light on some of these theories. Until then, that is all I have for you guys. So with that, I would like to conclude my Last of Us Part 2 trailer analysis. Thank you for tuning in. Let us know in the comments below what you think about the theory that Joel is actually dead in the trailer. Also, let me know if there are any mistakes that I made, if there is anything that I missed, or if there is anything you'd like to add to the analysis. And to be further updated on all things Last of Us Part 2, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out!